All right, today on the podcast, we have Corinne Shalvoy, one of, if not the busiest people in running. Corinne, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Matt. Great to be here.
I know what people are thinking right now. They're like, yeah, well, how do you even quantify that, Matt? What do you mean by the busiest person? Well, not only is Corinne an extremely good runner, she just finished top 10 at the Black Canyon 50K, and we'll go through her list of, accomplishments as a runner later on. She's also leading the Feed High Performance team. She is the founder and head of the Women Can movement. She is a podcast host at the Ultra Uncovered podcast. She is a coach. She's also, or was up until like a month ago, the assistant director of events for the United States Trail Running Conference. Also, she is the list is intense. The list is intense. A member of the board of advisors and the secretary of the American Trail Running Association. And not even listed on her LinkedIn profile is all of the announcing that she does for various events. Not even just across America. It feels like around the world. You're everywhere at all these live streams, which is impressive. And even this weekend, when you finished in the top 10 at the Black Canyon 50K, which was a loaded race. I can't wait to talk about this weekend. The day before, you did a bunch of broadcasting in the desert for the 100K. So there's a lot there. Corinne, 20 years ago, is this what you expected out of your professional and athletic life?
Definitely not. I would say that, like, geez, I mean, just listening to you read all of that, like, I just feel really fortunate to be able to do all of it because, I'm 42 years old, and it took until I was about 40 to really figure out and be able to get integrated into all of these different passions that I absolutely love. So, I said this in our Feed High Performance team, but it's honestly, like, it really is a dream for me to be doing all the work that I'm doing. And really grateful and thankful for it.
All right. So going to like a race like Black Canyon. So this is one of the hallmark trail and ultra races in North America and even the world now. This past weekend, the 100K was a golden ticket event for Western States. The top three people rolling down to the top six could get a golden ticket to Western States if they didn't already have one. This is a huge race. So for you, as someone who is racing the 50K on Sunday, and you have participated in this weekend before, and you've done some of the biggest races in the world before, but also doing the live show and all the live stream coverage, which I saw was 72,000 people tuned in via YouTube. I think is what Jamil Curry put out yesterday as some of the broadcast coverage. Which one are you more nervous for?
Oh, good question. Nervous for, I think I would probably say the media side, because I have done a number of live streams, but this was actually the first time I was a field commentator. So I've mostly been in the studio, and when you're in the studio, you have access to multiple devices and pieces of paper that have data and stats on them, and you can look things up on the fly, and you're really and you can see what other people at home see. So it does take a lot of getting used to, of you're kind of like a news anchor where you have a bunch of screens and things, but you also have those things. And when you're in the field, I was not exactly sure kind of what it would be like, and if I'd be able to jive with the in-studio teams the way that I wanted to, and just focusing on trying to bring, good value for people at home, while also resisting the urge to cheer a lot and aid people.
You weren't too good at resisting that urge. As someone who watched the whole thing, you were not good at resisting the urge to help people.
Sorry, I apologize. It's a matter of put the mic down. But it was also super fun because I got to experience the race more than if I was in the studio. I really felt like I was part of it, and I love this sport, so it was really cool to be on the ground as well. But I would say probably more nervous for the media side, just because I hadn't been in that particular position before.
Yeah, and not only that, but you and Brett Hornig, who had a similar role as well, were kind of like, kind of hopscotching your ways down the course. Kind of like, you would be at an aid station and he would be at an aid station, and you kind of leapfrog him to the next aid station, and so on and so forth, which made for a really fun scene from a viewing perspective.
Okay.
What was that like behind the scenes, not only managing your way to those aid stations, getting all the tech ready and kind of being on top of the race in addition to that, so that when you get there, you know what to say, but also just managing your energy level. Like this race lasts hours and hours. You have to be on when you are on. So what was that like as well?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's a little different than, like, for example, I've done Cocodona 2 years in a row, and doing like 4 or 5 days of commentary is very much a pacing effort. And so I think this one, it was great, and kudos to Mountain Outpost and Aravaipa for how they set it all up, because we have a lot of communication on the day. We have a WhatsApp chat that we're constantly talking to one another on, telling each other if we need to recharge a battery, if we're missing a piece of equipment, if we are stuck in traffic, etc. So there's a lot that happens on the fly. But ahead of that, Zach Marion is brilliant in putting together this essentially run of show and call sheet on where we're supposed to be when, and we just follow that. So I actually was alongside David Yasling. He was basically my my camera and tech guy. So he had his kit, he had all of that, and he knows how to use it. Thank goodness, because I do not. So really, we just we just traveled together to our various spots, and then he would set up a Starlink. He would set up all the equipment necessary, and then we would communicate with the in studio production on when they wanted us to go live. And I was just really trying to just observe and keep track of anyone I'd seen, and really like take in what the atmosphere felt like. And I think that's what I heard ahead of time that people really want to know from the field commentary is, how does somebody actually look? Did they say anything? Did their crew say anything? Like, what's going on in their, mental game that we can observe from the outside to speculate and make predictions in real time and that kind of thing. So that's what I was trying to be focused on. And yeah, I think the whole team, it's a huge team effort. So kudos to everybody who just comes together on the day.
Yeah, and that's the part that I like best as well, is that that insight
Yeah.
from kind of inside the ropes kind of vibe that you and Brett are able to provide on what these people look like when they're coming into the aid stations, which is truly like a lens behind the scenes, which I think, the for me, the shining moment of that over the weekend was kind of a quick little burst of info that Seth Ruling said to Brett as he came into, I think, like the
Yeah, no
second
one's
aid
fooling.
station
Mm-hmm.
of the 100K, where he's like, no one's fueling, no one's cooling, they're just running through all the aid stations. And he said it in a way of like, they're messing up, I'm not doing that, which was like, you would never get that anywhere else. It was such a great piece of information, and you were able to provide similar information about like, all right, this person's bloody. No, they didn't fall. They were bloody from yesterday. Like, they fell during
Right.
like a training
I
run.
might have been wrong on that one because Tara did fall quite a bit. But what she did say at the finish line was, "It didn't stop me this time. It didn't slow me down this time. Like, I just accepted that it was going to happen, and it went on." But yeah, to your point on that, also, I just think that like that's something unique to. I believe there was a chat where some people were speculating about, not speculating. They were mentioning that they had been at Ironmans and they had been at gravel races, and that this actual live stream and this media, they really appreciated and thought was almost better. And it was like so cool to see, like, okay, it's not just us that think everybody is doing a good job, at Mountain Outpost. It's people that have also, been at some of the biggest races in the world in other sports. And that is just like huge kudos to the team there.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this as someone who's an avid consumer of these live streams, but also I love a lot of sports.
Yeah.
So it's not the only kind of media that I'm consuming. And I wouldn't compare it to broadcasts of, say, road running, for example, or things like that. I just think that there isn't an analog there. Not only can you can't get the drone shots because a lot of times you're in cities where like the drone, like, orchestrating the drone is just too hazardous. You're never going to get a permit for that. And it's just like you don't have aid stations. Like people who do a water stop, as you know, like you're a fantastic runner,
Yeah.
like they're not stopping at the water stops. Like in
Yeah.
fact, they're like accelerating through the water stops, sometimes to even make a move.
Right.
And you'll see like, say, Galen Rupp or Des Linden, like on the back of a motorcycle going backwards, trying to tell you what's happening, but it's so hard because they're like, getting jostled around. It actually reminds me a lot more of a broadcast of like a golf tournament or like a NASCAR race. Where like there's this major event that's happening. It's going to take hours, but we're going to keep switching camera angles. We're going to keep switching spots in the action. And the key of it is like, you're going to have like the two hosts that are hosting it, but the best coverage comes from the people on like on the field, or
Yeah.
like in the pits if it's like a NASCAR race, giving you that inside info. So for
Right.
me, how it's morphed is that now that you have people like you and Brett and people who've done this in other races in the same capacity, Katie Asmith has done a good job of this.
Yeah.
Lee Yingling is excellent at it.
Amazing.
Really providing that insight where it really feels to me like the coverage of those two sports.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something that's critical with that, and I think I even mentioned this in a while back, I wrote an article about, trail running potentially moving into the Olympics. And something that I mentioned in that I just kind of came to mind as we were talking through that is that I think one difference may be, and yes, there's sometimes a Des Linden or a Carrot Goucher who has been in the sport and knows exactly what's going on. But I feel like everyone who's involved in these live streams, from a commentator standpoint, whether it's Corinne Malcolm or Dylan Bowman or anybody in the field, like you mentioned, Leah and Katie and people that are so good at it, they bring another level of being able to communicate it because they know exactly what it's like to do it. They've been in those shoes. They've been in that scenario. They've been, kind of bad, like experiencing the competitiveness of it. And so I think that having people, and that all starts with Jamil too, having people that know exactly what it feels like can communicate it in a unique way and bring kind of a different layer to it. So I think that's a critical part and a very important part of how it's done within ultra running.
Right. And people who don't know, Jamil Curry is the person who's the head of Air Viper Racing and Mountain Outpost, who's basically at this point the patriarch of of American trail and ultra running. What he's been able to do, to say nothing of his exploits as an athlete too, which are varied to say the least. And beyond all of that, which I think is it's so remarkable, is I think another key component, and you could speak more to this as someone who's on the ground and interacting with these people, is that it's obvious that the behind the scenes folks aren't merely like working for like a communications company, that they are also fans of the sport. You can tell by like the camera angles and how
Yeah.
people get set up and where they are like in relation to the the water stops and all of that sort of stuff. Like I think about where they were situated when Riley Brady passed Mary Denholm coming out of the aid station going up the hill. Like if they were in a different spot, they wouldn't have gotten that pass, right?
Yeah.
But because the whole production team, seemingly, or at least it seems from the outside, are trail and ultra fans.
Mm-hmm.
That everyone on the team has that shared expertise. It's not just like a few people kind of leading other people who are a little bit more multitaskers or Renaissance men and women in terms of like their production ability.
Totally. And I think also over time, like we start to gel with one another as a team, because a lot of us have worked together at a lot of different places. A lot of us have either, been in the race and then been, like, so last year, like with Katie, Katie was commentating and I was racing the 100K and, this like flipping those scripts, but like we've all worked together and we all actually know each other as people, which also helps a lot. I think too, I was going to say I think about this too when I am looking to like hire a photographer, for covering our athletes with the feed. It's one thing to be a sports photographer and be very good at capturing, shots. It's another thing to be a trail and ultra running photographer who is fully capable of getting up on the side of Kroger's canteen and willing to go do that in the middle of the night to get some really incredible shots of, somebody during the Hard Rock course. So it's like almost a requirement that you have to have that passion to be able to like survive the work that's needed as well. But it is it's a beautiful thing when it all comes together. And it's so cool that there's so many people in the sport that are multifaceted and multi-talented like that.
It's true. I mean, one of those photographers actually lives very close to me. AI Shoots. If you go over on Instagram, Aisha.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Like she's, like you said, not only an unbelievably good technical photographer, but like she's a hell of a runner. Like she can fly. I actually met her on the flight out to CIM. She was actually behind me, and I was hearing her talk to her like the random person next to her. I'm like, this person works in the running industry. I can tell. I turn around. I'm like, oh, I just heard you on Ali Fella's show or whatever.
She ran Javelina. I met her there, and she's a ball of energy and just like so much stoke and excitement for the sport and for the for the profession of capturing it.
And what's it been like for you as someone who has been involved with the sport ever since, I was looking at your coaching website and you have like a little
Mhm.
mini bio in there, someone who like grew up in the San
Oh,
Juans,
Lord,
been
I
running.
apologize for the coaching website. It needs some help. Anyone who's a website person, reach out. We need to upgrade
It's
it.
better
But
than my website, I'll tell
oh,
you
I don't know.
that. Well, but you're right in there that like ever since you were a teenager,
Yeah.
like you were in the mountains
Mhm.
doing epic stuff, which is really cool. That's for sure. Now, as you've grown as a professional, and now you talk to these people, the top tier athletes in the sport all the time, right? Not only with the feed, but
Mhm.
also like as a peer of a lot of these people, as a runner, because you're in the same class and category as an athlete, and the various other things that you do with Women Can and
Mhm.
the Trail Running Association, all that stuff.
Mhm.
What's it like for you as someone who's now like the consummate insider in a sport that you grew up with?
Yeah.
Is it hard to keep the stoke now that you know like how the sausage is made, or does it just amplify the effect of like a sport that you love?
That's a really great question, and I think it's something that's going to continue evolving, and I'm very conscious of wanting to preserve, my excitement about it. And so as I've gotten more and more involved in it, really from a professional standpoint, which has only been the last couple years, I think I do try every now and then to really just take a step back. And when you get, kind of in the minutia, or there's some things that go wrong, or there's challenges, stopping and trying to zoom out and be big picture of like, look at what I'm doing. Look, I'm working in this sport that I love. It's not going to be 100, just like if you were a professional athlete. I think that relationship with the sport can change once you become quote unquote professional at it and you're having to do it as a job. So I do think it takes a lot of work to constantly kind of remind and just get back to perspective on it. What I will say is that, like, I am learning too that I'm going to be at a lot of races in different capacities. And so it's important for me to be very clear as to what I'm doing at each of those. Black Canyon's one where I pretty much wore all the hats. Javelina last year, I said, I'm not working. I'm running this race. This is my A race. I am off the clock. Do not ask me about things. I'm sorry. I got to focus on my race. And so I think like you have to just kind of plan out that calendar and where you're going to put your energy levels, based on what's important to you. And yeah, it is a challenge, but like I said, I can say nothing but good things about how lucky I am to be able to kind of do both. And for it, sometimes I stop myself, I'm like, oh my god, I just got to talk to the you know RD of Western States for work. Like, how cool is that? How cool is this? Like, that definitely didn't feel like work. Or I get to talk to all these amazing athletes about what their season's going to be. And actually, that's part of my job now. So I love that. I love the people in the sport. And I think that, yeah, for me, I think what's going to be the challenge will just be really trying to learn how to better compartmentalize. When I'm training, I'm training. When I'm working, I'm working. And really just being able to kind of like focus on those things. But I think also being around so many inspiring people, I jokingly said that for the 50K, I was pretty much going to be running on Stoke because I might not have had the energy levels, but I had the inspiration from the day before. And that can also be a really big driver. And I think help me inadvertently kind of level up my own performance.
I'll say with Brett, so you and Brett had the same job essentially, at least from the outside looking in
Yeah.
on Saturday. I think you probably had an extra piece too, as someone who works with the the elite team at the feed. You probably have some responsibilities there as well, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, and then coming back to race the next day, the only comparison I have to this is I did something a little similar for the Eugene Marathon a couple years ago, and it
Mhm.
was the biggest disaster of my running career. Like it was the fact that you went seventh and then Brett went 10th in the
Yeah.
50K the next day.
Mhm.
I'm still shocked. I still can't believe it because I think I did like 2 miles of that marathon and literally walked back to the start. I was like, I'm done. I can't do this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, shout out to Brett. He ran a smoking fast time out there. So did Skylar Hall. He did a great job. I think that it's hard to know how much. And somebody made a good point. I think actually Jason Schlarb said, there's also this emotional tax that happens. Like, not only are you out there in the field commentating, but you're actually experiencing some very emotional things, and probably like that's an added stress that's kind of taking it out of you. I may have underestimated how much that was going to affect my ability to run well on Sunday, but I guess, it is what it is. And you got to do it sometimes to learn. I had every intention of bringing like a chair out with me to the field. That did not happen. So there's some things I could do differently next time. But yeah, I don't know.
You weren't going to sit in that chair. We all saw you. You were like bumping. You couldn't stop moving. You were like swaying back and forth. You're like spinning around trying to
did I have
find
the
people.
mom sway going on? Like the mom rock back and forth. Yeah, no doubt. I'm sure I did. But
that reminds me of something I was going to say earlier when I was listing the jobs that you are currently involved in, which is I think 5 of them or 6 of them at this point. Yeah. You're also a parent of a 10 and 13-year-old, which also provides its own amount of like mental taxing when it comes to those responsibilities, to say nothing of what Jason said about broadcasting duties. Yeah. What's it like in terms of how you talked to your kids? If it ever comes up about like pursuing goals, pursuing things that they're interested in, because I think you're such a wonderful example of someone who's done this incredibly well. As a parent, it's never a straightforward conversations. Like I feel like they last 30 seconds at best. So like, what's it like for you to try to impart whatever knowledge you've gained at this point to your kids as they progress in their lives and start thinking about things that they enjoy?
Yeah. So I think I'll start this answer with the fact that I actually screamed at the top of my lungs last night to my 13-year-old. I had a complete mental break and was so frustrated that I was screaming and hollering at him because he was driving me crazy. And that's just reality, of how hard it is to, I guess, have a preteen or almost.
I am not judging you. Let me just say, I don't have a similar story from yesterday, but I'm not judging you at all, because you can go back probably not that far in my life to something very similar.
Yeah, I think it's just that, people don't necessarily talk about that. There's challenges at every stage of parenthood, but all that to say that, like, yeah, I'm also not, I have a lot of weak moments in parenting and sometimes running helps with mitigating those, but like, just kudos to everyone out there who's dealing with kids that are around this age, because it's not easy, and I feel like I could probably do a lot better job at it than I am right now. What I do think is important, and I would say too, like my boys and my husband, most importantly, like I couldn't do the things that I do right now without them and without their support. I mean, my boys crewed me at Javelina. They actually crewed me at my first 100, which was Leadville, which was a really awful experience. And they saw me in the worst lows of lows. And so it was great for them to be able to experience like the fun, good day at Javelina. And so I do love getting them involved. And they like doing it. Like, they like being out there, like they like helping. And so I'm really appreciative for that. Like, hopefully in the future, they'll be able to pace me at some races. I'd love to have them, pacing me out at Hard Rock in the future. Something like that would be just incredibly meaningful. Because I do come back to the fact that at the end of the day, I'm probably not going to remember, what place I got at X race, but I am going to remember the memories with both my husband and my kids. And so I think not only is it good to get them involved and let them see the good and the bad, so that, by example, even if they don't listen to me tell them, like, sometimes you got to stick with things, for years for them to work out. They see it because they've seen me have a really bad 100, and then they've seen me have a good 100, and they know that there was 3 years in between those two. Like, so I think setting just living by example. We hear this when our kids are really, really little too, that they're observing us way more than we realize. And so the fact that they see my husband and I go out for a run every day, the fact that they see us prioritize it and skip doing, things that maybe would be more fun because we are dedicated to our training. Those things, I think, are the best way that I can kind of teach them some of those just lifestyle type important habits and things like that. So yeah, we do have conversations about it. I think one of them, I think the older one is interested in running now, the younger one not so much. But they both also know that like this is something you can do for your whole life, and we want them to just be athletic their whole life and enjoy being outdoors. And talk to them often about examples of people who maybe they weren't the best in high school and they're a professional trail runner in their 30s, like things like that. So I think those are kind of some of the lessons we try to embed, along with we're having this conversation right now. I was a super skinny, scrawny kid growing up, and late bloomer as well. And as they're getting into like the teenage years, we're talking to them about the importance of fueling, the importance of eating enough, the importance of protein, the importance of being strong versus looking muscular, things like that. So all those little lessons, like it's great to have running as a way to tie back to teaching them about some of those things.
And I can only imagine, it's funny, I think everything that we say can be relative to our lived experiences, but even just the words that you said, like, oh, I had a bad 100. It's like, still 100 miles, man. Like, it's still an insane thing. So you're talking about learning from example, like the fact that they can say, like, my mom and dad run 100-mile. I don't know if Graham runs 100-mile races, but I know he's an active runner. But like, my mom runs 100 miles. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and no matter how it went, like, just like that, the fact that that is a sentence is like
Yeah.
astonishing,
Yeah.
which then begs another question. Like, have you always just been a high energy person? Like, I'm just trying to imagine balancing all of these things
Yeah.
with the training, with the parenting,
Mm-hmm.
and considering the new things that you're putting on your plate, like the Women Can movement, like starting a podcast, like starting a
Mm-hmm.
new full-time job a little over a year ago. Like, you're obviously someone who is thinking of new things and trying to see like where you can fit into, the things that you enjoy, which also requires energy. So I guess talk to me about like your energy as a youngster or in your
Mm-hmm.
20s, and how you've been able to maximize seemingly the energy that you have now to go after the things that are important to you.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that, to answer your first question, I was pretty energetic young kid. I remember classmates of mine telling me I was going to have, like, did Corinne have her spaz out of the day? Like, did she spaz out during the day? Yes. That was a bit of a spaz. Um, but also, like, I played a lot of sports growing up. I had, you know, I would say a pretty full, childhood of just being active a lot. I as I've gotten older, like I definitely don't feel like I have quite as much energy as I did in the past. um, and so I guess I'm still working on continuing to to hone that and like figure out the best ways to keep that up. But I think it helps a lot when you really enjoy what you're doing. So helps to plan. I have a husband, Graham is a mega planner. I'm a little bit more of a like plan it in my head, procrastinate, and then do it. So it helps to have that organization. And I think I think you need to, I don't know. I think, again, the reason I shifted out of being in corporate America a couple years ago was because I didn't feel like I was maybe getting that energy back from the work I was doing. So there's this reciprocation that happens of putting that energy in and then feeling like you're getting something back from it, whether it's training or it's, you know, the professional work that you're doing. And so I think it also just required me to shift what I was putting that energy in to make sure that I was getting something back out of it.
Now, while this is not a career podcast, this is definitely a running podcast. I am curious about that, as someone who also like has to live his life and earn an income, and so do everyone else who's listening to this podcast right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So, what was that process like for you, making that shift professionally and putting yourself in position to get a job that did meld well with your interests and what you were hoping to do in the future?
Yeah, it took some time for sure. I mean, I think I would say that it kind of evolved over. I was most recently working in a startup. I was brought in to lead the recruiting and talent acquisition function within a data center company about 8 years ago. Um, that role that I was in was kind of the first time I'd been in a little bit more of, I would say, like an entrepreneurial, you be the one figuring out how to set up, this organization within the company, and you guide all the strategy on it. And I love the building aspect of that. And that actually started to evolve into doing more culture work with the company. So I helped create the core values, worked with the executive team on that, stood up all of our initiatives for what's called ESG, which is environmental social governance, things like, so it became more of also just like a culture type role, which I really loved. I absolutely loved that role. And then, 5-6 years into it, we had some management changes. I didn't quite feel like I had the autonomy I had when I first started. And I really just was not as much enjoying the work that I was doing. And it got to a point where, a lot of conversations with my husband of him saying, it's more important that you're happy. It's more important that you're happy than you're making a lot of money. We can figure this out. We can do, we can shift some things around. But the most important thing is that you're happy. And it was a rough period because I basically left that role without having anything, to jump into. And I took almost a year off of working professionally, made no money, coached some people, but spent the summer with my children. They were at a point where they were kind of like growing out of their summer programs, and it was awesome to be able to spend time with them. That's something I tried to do right after my second son was born, was actually said, what if I take the role of stay-at-home mom? And that wasn't a good time for me to do that. It wasn't the right thing for me at that time, but I think it kind of was later in life when I could actually go take them to the mountains and do stuff with them. And like, but that was also a very rough year because I had to drastically change my spending habits. We had to, get rid of everything that we were buying that was like unnecessary. It was just but I was happy. I was not burnout. I was not overstressed. I was probably a much nicer mom and wife. and I was able to continue training and running. And then it took probably another 6 months for me to figure out was I going to go back into corporate? Was I going to start my own thing? I had a couple of, like hits and starts where I did set up my own recruiting firm. I was going to do freelance recruiting. And I started to get some work in that, and to also just realize that I wasn't super passionate about it. I wasn't really loving it. I didn't want to just like dive into doing business development for that every day. But what I did want to do was recruit athletes to be sponsored, to provide support, to provide education from a nutrition standpoint, to help bring the sport to another level of giving people the tools and the nutritional, fueling necessary to have breakout performances in a sport that I absolutely love. And so I, essentially reached out to someone who I had known from 8 years ago, being in a Ragnar relay with her. And she is now the VP of marketing at the feed, and had multiple conversations with her. And over the course of about 3 months, kind of talked to her about, let me help the feed move into this space, because there's an amazing market. We're in need of it. These ultra runners eat a lot. They want to eat all of the things and all the different things. And it would be a huge win-win, because I think I've lived in this world for the last 5-6 years, and I would love to, help the feed move into this world. And I think we can do some great things for athletes.
I love this. So people listening to this, you might see some athletes. You may have already seen some athletes, at races with, huge The Feed print on their logo and on their gear. And we thank Corinne Shalvoy for that, which is really an exciting thing. I think it's so cool that you essentially created your own professional reality. And I think that is such an awesome thing to witness. And kudos to you for doing that. Also, when that little hint of going back to your old life emerged, having the discipline, but also like the self-knowledge to be like, no, hold on. I moved away from this for a reason. And
Yeah.
while it might be an easy short-term fix to, certain money issues and things like that, or maybe living a more comfortable life, kudos to you for being able to recognize the situation for what it was and going after what you wanted, because it's easier said than done. There's probably a lot of billboards and YouTube quotes that
Yeah.
that say that, but living that life is certainly a far cry from reading it or from hearing about it.
Yeah.
With that being the sorry.
One point on that, I honestly, I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of my husband. And I think, like I absolutely have now this brand, and uh, women can, and I have said multiple times that like that is absolutely the message that I want out in the world. But that is, there are also oftentimes, partners and or friends or significant others who are supporting those women in what they can and what they are doing. And I think that that's important to acknowledge. I had so many conversations because when I left corporate, I essentially felt like a failure. I felt like I'd failed at my job, even though
I can relate to that. I
even though I was
had a similar experience.
yeah, I know. It's like I was high performing, but guess what? This entity did not necessarily, see the value. And that's a hard thing to swallow, especially when you feel like you've worked so hard. You feel like you know what you're doing. You feel like you're capable, you're intelligent. It's a really hard thing to not have really hit you and hit you hard of in terms of your self-worth. And so it was pivotal, and it was super critical that at times, my husband told me that I was courageous for leaving, and that it was the right thing to do, and that I wasn't a failure for taking a step away from it, even though, it looks like you're quote unquote quitting something. And so it also takes, having that support system to be able to back you up on it. And I think that's it's a key part of it.
Well said. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the whole women can idea is 100% true, but no one does everything alone.
Right.
There's definitely support along the way from a variety of different people.
Yep.
With that being the case, let's talk about your running and your goals, because you're doing a lot of things. With that said, you're not merely a dedicated amateur runner, which so many of us are who listen to this podcast. You're an excellent runner who places very well. You mentioned before what you did at Javelina last year.
Mhm.
You are an incredible athlete. So with everything that's on your plate, how do you think about your own running performance goals in the short term and long term?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Matt. I mean, right back at you. I think you are also an amazing athlete. I think that people that listen to this, anyone who toes the line at these races and who dedicates themselves to the training, like, you need to give yourself credit for that. It is admirable, and it is something that 99% of the population does not do. So it's all relative. We all have our own little, where we live within this spectrum of comparison. And when you follow the pros in this sport, it's really easy to be like, oh, I'm just okay. But yeah, I'll just kudos to everybody who's out there doing the work day in and day out. It's something that most people don't do.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. But also,
Yeah.
you are like on the cusp of getting a potential golden ticket. So that is
Oh,
also
well, but that wasn't
remarkable.
always the case. Like, I started,
Yeah.
I have kind of an interesting, I guess, journey with ultra running, and man, I'm lucky to be able to be still competing, in my early 40s. And I truly believe, and maybe I'm just telling myself this so that I will keep training, but I believe that I have another 10 years to keep progressing in this sport. Like, I truly believe that. From a training age in trail and ultra running, like, I'm only like 6 years old, 7 years old. I did do, track and cross country growing up, but I took a long break from real heavy training when I had my kids. And sometimes I wish maybe I jumped back in a little bit earlier, but also I think that it's okay. Like I said, I was a late bloomer in all things. And so maybe I'm kind of a late bloomer in trail and ultra running too. And so I don't think of myself as being a 42-year-old. I think of myself as being someone who's been doing this sport and training at a decently high level for 5 or 6 years. And I think that I can continue to build that. Look at Riley Brady 10 years ago. 10 years ago, ran their first ultra. And, David Roach, 12, 13 years of very, very dedicated training before, quote unquote, the breakthroughs are happening. And so I think this sport is one that you really, really have to be patient at. And you have to, for most people, kind of know that it's going to take years before you could see your potential. And you have to stick with it to do that. So that's kind of where I'm at, is just that I'm continuing to try to, build my own training year after year, do things a little different, do things a little bit, maybe, increase that volume a bit year over year, and try to just figure out, the 100-mile distance, figure out how I can, keep on top of my speed and keep on top of my strength. And there are areas that I think I still can very much evolve as an athlete. And so I'm excited to explore those.
Well said about the age and the training age and things like that. And actually, the podcast that's going to be coming out after this podcast, I recorded yesterday with a gentleman, Adrian Massey, who's 47, started running at age 35. And, he does a ton of trails, and he does everything. He does the indoor track, he does trails, he does surfing, he does the whole thing. And he did his first indoor track meet 2 weekends ago at the New England East Regional Indoor Track Meet for Masters. And he did the 200, the 400, and the 3,000. Yeah, this is his first one. So he's like looking around like, how do I even start a sprint? Yeah. I don't even know. So he ran the 200 in 27 seconds. He did the 400 in 60 flat, and he ran the 3,000 in 9:47. This guy started running at age 35, and he won all three of them. And it's just like,
cool.
It's insane. It really is, and it's remarkable. What you're doing from an ultra perspective, again, for you that means, for you, ultra and trail is synonymous, because you're doing you're on the trail side of things within the ultra community. But just from preparing and competing in ultras, just like in triathlon, it's a time sensitive sport, right? Like, you're going to be out there training for a race that's going to last you a dozen hours. Like, you can't just be going out there 45 minutes at a time. You have to be able to put in the hours as well. So how do you manage your training schedule in conjunction with everything else you got going on?
Yeah. We started to have to figure this out when the boys were younger, and we'd have to take turns. So there was a lot of, I'll do who's going to get the early run this weekend, and who's going to get the 10 a.m. start. And one person starts at 6 and one person starts at 10, and we swap children at the trailhead. And now that they're a little older, it's great that, we can sometimes run together and go out for 2 or 3 hours on our own. Of course, we still have to work that around, we have to work that around our, if our kids are in sports and activities that they have going on. It's been a big help, honestly, that Graham's parents moved here a couple of years ago, and they're only 5 minutes away. They watched them while we were at Black Canyon. So kudos to the grandparents for helping out on that. My parents have watched the boys multiple times. We'll send them down to Ouray. You're going to Ouray for 2 weeks, and, Ouray camp, in which they don't mind, because they get to go out and shoot with my dad and like do fun things. And,
well, also they're at like 14,000 feet, so they get the red blood cells going when they're in Ouray.
It's training. But no, I think that it just takes organization. I mean, I'm lucky that my work is a bit flexible in that. And so it just takes a lot of planning and prioritizing it. Luckily, Graham and I started the Castle Rock Run Club here, and we have a group of friends who all of us are in the same boat.
All right, so 7 jobs. I missed the Castle Rock Run Club when I was doing the rundown earlier.
It's self-sufficient at this point. We don't do very much with it, but it's a great group of people who also are like, yeah, well, when are you going to start? Because I have to get back for a 9 a.m. basketball game. Well, I'm going to start now because I have to get back for a 7 a.m. So we have a cohort of 3 people who can run together on the weekend starting at X time, and 4 people that will do a later shift because their kids have early games. It's like,
that's so funny.
It's great. Yeah. It's great. So using the support systems again, but also just like mapping out the week. You and I talked about it. We got to go for a run after this. I got an hour break in between calls. Go get it done.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of cool that you and Graham are similar speeds. which is really interesting. It's like,
Grim's
I think,
faster than me, but
oh, okay.
as it gets longer,
But you guys are in the same ballpark, right? Relatively speaking. It was interesting because he ran this past weekend as well.
Yeah.
Did you get any insights into what he saw on the race course? Because I know that he was running with what it
Yeah.
seemed like. Again, it's hard to track everybody at the same time, but it seemed
Yeah.
like he was running with the women's leaders for a long time.
He was. And he had a really, really hot first 50, 60K that he thinks maybe he was just a little bit overreaching on. And then he ended up kind of having to shuffle it in a bit at the end. He did finish, but well over his intended goal time. He did have a win, though, in his nutrition. It's the first race he did not throw up at. It's been a struggle for him for a long time. And so that was a huge success. And that was his point in doing this race. And then he's doing another 100K kind of in the summer, is to really practice all of the nutrition, hydration, balancing, to make sure that GI stuff doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, at this point, he has to do it for like the family rep. Like, if Graham Shalvoy is throwing up all over the place while his wife works at the feed, like, this is just not like a match.
Yeah. He's doing it for my own professional.
Right? It'd be like someone who like is the CEO of like what's it called? Like a suntan oil company, and like their spouse just is like walking around with a sunburn like 24/7. Like it's just not a great match.
Yeah. No, he is someone who I very much respect in that he is a amazing salesperson, and so he's used to getting kind of told no or knocked down a lot and getting right back up, and he does that in his running too, and it kind of fuels the fire more for him to try to figure it out. So I pulled him into this crazy sport. I will never ski like he does. So we have some of our own strengths, but hopefully we are figuring out that nutrition hydration piece. And I don't know. It's gonna be great to eventually see him kind of nail one of these.
So we're recording today on February 13th. Still have most of the year left. With everything that you are involved in, what are some of the things that you are really excited about in 2025? Both from, say, on the professional side, on the Women Can side, the podcasting side, the broadcasting, the running. What are some of the highlights that, like, when you look down the calendar, you're just super pumped to get to?
Yeah, there's so many. I think, short term next up for me, racing wise, will be Gorge Waterfalls 100K. Again, another super deep field.
A U.S. champion, a U.S. World champ qualifier.
Long course Worlds qualifier. So going to go out there and run that. Also be supporting David Roach running that, maybe one or two other high performance team athletes from the feed. And then I am super stoked to then be at Cocodona. Still not 100% on if I will commentate and or support, but one way or another, I will be there. Courtney is racing, of course, as we know, and the feed supporting a couple other athletes doing Cocodona.
We should say that's the Cocodona 250 for people.
Cocodona 250.
And then Courtney being Courtney DeWalter.
Courtney DeWalter. Yep. Sorry. Just speaking the lingo here.
I know. I get you. Just in case some of the listeners.
Thank you. That's great. And then we'll be, the feed will also be at Western States. Of course, many runners. Esther Chilag is on our high performance team this year. Amazing runner out of Hong Kong who has gotten 2 top 3 placings in the women's field at Western States, is returning again. David Roach is also running. And so supporting the athletes there, I got to attend Western for the first time last year, and it was a blast. So I'm looking forward to going back. It's such a cool, thing to witness. And the race this year is just bonkers. We say that every year, but it truly is.
Yeah. But the lead up's different this year, where I feel like we're going to be doing 6 months of like, can you believe it?
Yeah,
kind of vibe.
Yeah,
it's like,
sure.
That's not always the case. Sometimes right now we're like, all right, who's going to get the tickets?
Right.
Now it's like, even if like those tickets just evaporated, it's still going to be an unbelievable field.
It is on both sides. It's going to be, I think, historic for sure. On the Women Can front, so yeah, I would love people to continue following us. We've got an Instagram page, and we'll continue doing our artist series. So every 6 weeks or so, we're featuring a design from a female artist and their interpretation of the message Women Can, and then putting out limited edition shirts and tote bags on those. And then I also want to start, doing some more long form, telling the stories of women who are inspired by other women, things that women have done that they never thought they could do. That's going to be coming up. Potentially sharing, I'm maybe talking to someone who might do some writing for us on like a Substack or something like that. So kind of just continuing to build that community and share those stories is also something that's a big goal of mine for that. It's through about June, and then we're going to have to think about the rest of the year.
My goodness, I'm tired just hearing the rundown.
Oh,
Corinne,
I'm actually coaching my friend Liz Canty for Western States. She got in the lottery. She's run it before about 10 years ago. Was it 10 years ago? 2013, I think. So yeah, I'm super excited to hopefully help her train for having a Great Western.
That's awesome. Corinne, thank you so much for coming on the show. The links to all of this are going to be in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for the running community, and good luck with everything in 2025.
Thank you, Matt. It was awesome to be on and chat with you.